Pure Experiences.
Welcome to the Pure Experiences Podcasts.
Desire management is a new term, probably for many of the listeners, because it is not something which is mainstream. You can think of it as a meta subject under which many subjects are covered. And also, I just made it up in order to discuss this bigger subject of desires. What are they? How many kinds? How to manage them? And what are the consequences of desires? So I've spoken about desires a lot. You can find it scattered here and there in many different talks on this podcast or this channel. Last time in the Sunday Q&A, this topic came up, and I can kind of gave an introduction to the desire, what it means, and how every action, every event can be seen as a desire. Desire is something that the mind does. So if you need a little bit of detailed discussion on that aspect of desires, a phenomena in the mind, then I recommend listening to the last episode, which is the Sunday Q&A number 7. Today we are going to take that subject forward in more structured manner. Last time we saw them as a automated mechanism in the mind and a cause of suffering, especially the unfulfilled desires. They are the cause of the suffering. Nothing else causes suffering. So desire management is a meta subject. It includes many things in it. It won't be possible to talk about it in detail, but I'm going to cover a little bit an overview of the subject today. So my definition of this word desire is an event in the mind that motivates an action. An event that causes an action. That is the desire. It is seen. It can be perceived. And actually we perceive the immediate effects of the desire rather than the desire itself. But it is possible to see that an event happened in the mind that caused some kind of action, some kind of perception, internal perception to happen. The desire, as we discussed, comes from the memory, which is the storehouse of all the experiences that the person has gone through. It is impossible to desire something. The desire happens, and then the responsibility of the desire is taken up by the imaginary person. These are all events that follow the event of desire. And after that, the action follows, which is again owned, or the responsibility is taken by the imaginary person or the individual or the identity or the I. The actions can be of three kinds: thoughts, speech, and actions that happen, movements that happen through the body. There are only three kinds of actions, but they can be further divided. The thoughts can be of language, images, sounds, and so on. And the speech can be of many kinds. Good speech, bad speech, speech made to accomplish something, and so on. And the bodily actions are also of many kinds, it looks like. But body is actually only operating the muscles. When we say that I am doing this through my hands, I am doing this through my legs, or my eyes are moving, and so on, it is only the muscles that are moving. The mind, through the brain, through the nervous system, interfaces with this lower layer of itself, the body, and causes changes in the body. These are seen as actions of the body. Actually, all the actions of any kind can be thought of as being caused by some kind of desire. Whenever there is an action, we can associate it with a cause which will be seen as a desire in the mind. All actions are then followed by consequences, which are again of many kinds. This is a kind of law that memory, desire, action, consequences are then again impressed on the memory, and the cycle repeats. This is one of the laws of the desires. It is very important and essential that these events are going to happen in this sequence always. There are other laws regarding the desires, such that just now I said desires originate from memory automatically. Nobody desires anything. The individual is not free to desire anything. The individual is a consequence of ownership of a desire. That's all an individual is. The desire is also called as will, and many philosophers have correctly identified the will as the cause for all the actions, including the natural occurrences that happen in the world. Rain, thunder, days and nights, plants growing, and so on. Natural calamities, disasters, they are all can be thought of as will or desire of that happens in the universal mind. So nothing here, no part of our experience is devoid of desire or devoid of will. Since there is no individual, the will is always universal, or the desire is always universal. This is another law. So we can discover a few more laws if you are interested regarding desires. But today I am not going to do that kind of exploration. It is sufficient to know that these events we are calling as desires, they follow certain regularities which we are going to call them as laws. For the purpose of study, we can classify them, and I have classified desires in 4 ways based on time duration, repetitions or frequency of the desires, consequences, and 4th is necessity. So I know of these 4 ways to classify the desires. There can be some more ways, but today we are going to study only these 4 ways to classify the desires. The classification helps in the study, helps in the understanding of this event of desire. If you want to classify the desires based on time duration, then according to my experience, there are 6 kinds of desires based on how long they last. The first one is control systems, second is reactions, third is impulses, 4th is intention, 5th is wish, and 6th is sanskars or impressions, latent impressions. So in the increasing order of time duration, you can say that the desires are of these kinds. Control systems are something which we do not usually take ownership of. Although we do say that I did that, but we know that it happened automatically. So for example, if you are about to fall down, you very quickly balance yourself, hold something, and if you touch something hot, very quickly you remove your hand. These are all due to the control systems, the control mechanisms that are in the nervous system. They are built in the nervous system. They happen without even our knowledge, without even knowing that they are happening. They are so automatic. And there are bodily processes that are happening which can be seen as control systems, like the breathing, heart beating, digestion, cellular activities, and so on. Why are they desires? Because there is a mechanism behind them which causes that action, and by the definition of the word, it is a desire that is responsible for that action. If I touch something hot and I withdraw my hand, I say I did not want to touch that hot thing. There is a memory imprint there. There is a control system there which is evoked, and the action happens. Actually, it happens so fast and is involuntary. Actually, all actions are involuntary, but this we can clearly see that it is involuntary. And we say that I did not desire it, it simply happened. But there was a desire. Just like I said, all the actions, including the actions of inanimate, non-sentient things, can be said to have an intention there, because there is a cause of that kind of action. The control systems, they produce a desire and action that lasts for a few milliseconds, not more than a second. The next kind of desire is reactions. Reactions are, just like the word says, an action that is produced as a reaction to some situation. You see a wild animal or you see an angry dog and you run away. This is a reaction. You see your enemy and the anger arises. This is a reaction. You can say that I did not desire it, but usually there is a memory imprint there. An event is produced in the mind which causes a reaction. You are hungry and you see food and your reaction is to eat the food. So we do not need a very long-term discussion and planning to execute that action. Although it happens very, very quickly and we do not generally say that I desired that, but there is a desire to do it and it happens very quickly. We do take responsibility of reactions also, just like control systems. And the reactions, they usually do not last more than a few minutes. You react and then you become aware and then some desired actions happen. The reactions can come in the category of undesired actions also. But really there is no action that is undesired, only that involuntary desires are causing them. Another kind of desire that can be seen based on the time duration is impulse. And impulse is also a reaction to a situation, but is clearly seen as a desire. And usually there is a little bit of delay. There is a delay of few seconds to few minutes, and it comes like a very, very powerful desire, a very powerful event which cannot be controlled. This is the difference between a well thought and well planned desire and its execution, and an impulse. That the impulse usually cannot be controlled. It is beyond our control. So a little bit a middle ground here between the desire as it is understood by an ordinary person and our meaning, our definition of desire. So the impulse is again produced out of a memory. There is a little bit of delay, although it happens totally in unawareness. It happens without any control, and so it deserves its own category. Very common experience for everybody, I think. As soon as you see something which you like, there is an impulse to get it. You are shopping and you see something which you need, impulsively you get it. You take it and into your shopping basket. You dislike somebody and there is an impulse to insult that person or to attack that person. Many habitual actions are impulsive in nature because of repetitions, frequent repetitions. It has become a habit. So you're driving a car, you see somebody in front of the car and there is impulse to stop the car. You can also say that it is also a kind of reaction. The impulse is a desired reaction. You do not usually say that, oh, that I did not really want that thing to happen. You always say, I wanted that action to happen, and it happens very, very quickly. That is the difference between ordinary reaction and an impulse, that we want it, we desire it. Sexual impulses, very common thing. The characteristic of the impulse is they are mostly automated, habitual, and there is no intelligence or planning behind an impulse. It simply happens. So impulses can last for a few minutes to an hour, something like that, and then they are forgotten. Sometimes they come and go. They do not even give you time to act. The next kind of time-based desire is intention. This can be properly called as desire in ordinary words. Intention is clearly seen as something which I desire and I want it to happen. I am for it. And I can see it appearing. I can see the corresponding thoughts. I can see speech, if any, if it produces any speech or any preparatory actions through the body, like writing down your shopping list or writing down what do you need to do, purchasing the tickets for your next trip, and so on. These actions, they are well thought of and can be seen as intentional, which means there is an intelligence behind that action. So there is something which very important, that is a characteristic of an intention or a well thought desire, is that it is under our control, under the conscious control. It is voluntary. You can suspend it, you can delay it, you can cancel it, you can choose not to act on it. This is what gives us an illusion of free will, that I willed it. But if you look at it deeply, if you investigate, the seed desire that happens without willing. The willing happens without willing. It is not possible to will a will. It is not possible to desire a desire. The desire comes first. And then the planning and mental activity that is triggered by it, that we call as voluntary, but it is also not voluntary. It is totally governed by our own experiences, our own knowledge, wisdom, and intelligence. That itself is a big subject, you can see. That's why I called it intention. Now probably there are many meanings of the word intention, but the basic meaning is it is a kind of desire. This is what I intend to do. That means that is what is my desire to do. But it is a well thought desire. There is a possibility to not act here if it is an intention. Usually for an ordinary person who does not observe their mind so much, the intention is as good as an impulse. They may say that I thought about it. They may say that I planned and I did my due diligence. I thought of the consequences and all. But actually it is nothing more than a delayed impulse. The impulse is there, and there is a fake kind of behavior by the individual that I am doing it intentionally, but being governed by the impulse, really, it gets delayed and so takes on the appearance of an intention. So you can see intentions can be also of many kinds. There can be good intentions, bad intentions, very wise intentions, not so wise, and so on. But the characteristic of the intention is that there is intelligence behind it. There is proper planning, decision making, and weighing likes and dislikes, and all these many mechanisms, logical and rational abilities, they are all behind an intention. So the word intention and intelligence, they most probably have the same root, which is teleos. Hopefully I am pronouncing it correctly. Teleos means end goal, a purpose, a meaning. When you put in front of it, it means internal end goal, internal purpose. From there the word intention comes, and now you can see the meaning becomes very clear, that it is an event in the mind which is goal directed. It tries to achieve a purpose, tries to achieve something. The word intelligence also comes from there. An action that is goal directed, a behavior that is intentional, starts from a desire, a meaningful desire, that is called intelligence. We say that I see signs of intelligence in this kind of behavior when we perceive the desire and intention and planning, decision making, logical, rational thought, evaluation, and so on behind that behavior. So we say this animal looks very intelligent because we see all these events happening there. We can guess at least. When we say this machine is very intelligent, a smart machine, because these kinds of events are programmed in the machine. The activity of that computer or the machine looks looks intentional. It looks like it is desiring and doing. So although it is all a series of programs, same for this machine, which we call human mind. It's all a series of programs, memories, but a well-structured program. The seed is always something which is not intended, which happens by its own. It is totally automated, totally deterministic. The intention can last for many hours to many, many days also. So if it takes a long time to do something, to achieve a goal, to fulfill a purpose, or that activity is planned in steps, it can take a long time, and so that desire lasts for many hours, too many days, sometimes months, and that is how it takes on the appearances of intention. The next kind of desire is a wish. I'm calling it a wish because wish is a synonym for will and desire. But I'm using this word to denote a desire that lasts for many years, tens of years, decades, or sometimes for a full lifetime. Such as your desire to become an artist, your desire to do certain kind of job, your desire to get money and power, your desire to raise a family. These last for so long that we don't even call them desire, we call them as my life goal. So it is an intention that is prolonged, lasts for many, many years, lifetime. So I'm calling them as wish. Because usually we say this word wish, that I wish to become such and such. I wish to do this in my life, so on. That's why it is a fitting word. It is nothing but a desire, only that it takes a very long time to fulfill it or to let go of it, or it ends after a very long time, and the person keeps doing efforts. There is a continuous effort to fulfill the wish. You can say the desire to marry someone, or a desire to buy something big and expensive like a car or a house can come under this category of wish, because it takes a long time usually. There is another kind of desire which is not well known and is spiritual in nature, you can say, is metaphysical kind, and I'm calling it as sanskar, or the latent impressions. Last time when we were discussing desires, I said that, well, the sanskars are not really desires because you cannot see them. You can only see the effects of the latent impressions. That's why they are called latent, because not yet manifested. These are the memories that are not destroyed when the person or the body dies. All the desires that we discussed just now, the rest of the 5 kinds, they get destroyed as soon as the body is destroyed, because mostly based on body. But the latent impressions, they are immortal. They cannot be destroyed. They live as long as the mind lives, which is, who knows, it lives for many, many lifetimes. These latent impressions, sanskars, are also called the karmic impression, because you see the desire produces the action. Karma means nothing but an action. So it has the same root. All these concepts, they have the same root, same meaning actually. So the latent impressions, they are formed during our lifetime. They survive the death of the individual, and that's why we can call them as the desire of the jeev, or the desire of this entity that survives death and is reborn. Why? Why does it take a rebirth? Because of these latent impressions, because of these desires. It takes on another form and tries to fulfill those desires. So the karmic kind of desires, they are also of a few kinds about which we have discussed before when I was talking about rebirth and the structure of the universal mind, but there are no English words for them. So you must have heard about the different kinds of karmas, like the prarabdha, the sanchit, and a few more kinds. So the individual is born with these latent desires to fulfill these latent desires. Actually, birth is birth of the individual. The individual does not take birth. The individual is born. The desires take birth. Desires are the root of the individual. Just like I said, the individual is made up of desires. An individual is defined by what he says, what he thinks, what he does, and the kind of desires or the character he has, because the character is fully determined by the desires only, nothing else. What kind of things you desire determines your character. The individual takes on a proper body according to the latent desires. The body is a consequence of desires. The body does not have desires or control systems or anything. They are produced by the latent desires. So you see, this science of desire is very deep. I don't think anybody thinks about desires like this, the way I am describing. You can see it is never taught to anybody. This subject, desire management or the science of desires, is missing from your curriculum. And probably that is the most important subject that one needs to know. It is all that is, you see. All of my life is nothing but a consequence of desires, a play of desires. All the activities of the individual, the mind, the body, the jiv, the universal mind, the whole existence is nothing but a play of desires. Now, if you don't want to study this, then what else would you like to study? Because that is all there is. And unfortunately, it is never taught to anybody. Nobody knows these things. Nobody knows these classifications. Nobody knows the definition of desires. What do they know? They know that if a desire is there, I must fulfill it. It's all darkness here. So these were the 6 kind of desires that are based on a classification depending on the time duration. There can be a second kind of classification which is based on the frequency or repetitions of the desires. So as you can guess, there are recurring desires. They repeat often. Then there can be one-time desires. And there can be randomly repeating desires. Sometimes they come, sometimes they're gone and then come again randomly. So we know what a repeating or recurring desire is. Every day we wake up and there is a desire to eat. There is a desire to excrete. There is a desire to go here and there and watch TV and so on. These are repeating desires, sexual desires. Repeat. The desire to go to some places, that is a habitual thing. It repeats. If you don't do this, if you don't repeat that action, it feels like my desires are not being satisfied. And the characteristic of this desire is, as soon as it is done, for the time being it is gone. You don't want to do it again. For example, the hunger is nothing but a desire. It is communicated by the body. So as soon as, just like pain is a desire that is communicated by the body, it's got the control systems of the body. Just like hunger, it happens again and again. As soon as there is a need, the desire arises, the action is performed and the desire goes away. And whenever there is a need again, it happens again. Usually we do not say that I desired. We call it my habit or a basic thing, basic need, basic behavior. That is how I behave usually. I go to this place, I go to club, I go to pub, I go to office. These are recurring desires, nothing else. Smoking, for example, or drinking, overeating, these are recurring kinds of desires. And the characteristic of such desire is that there is very little intelligence behind that. No thought is involved most of the time. Mostly automated, autonomous. Some are involuntary also, or have a little bit of control, very little control. Some are impulsive also. Then there can be one-time desires. I want to go to this place. I want to go to this hill station, mountains. I want to go and watch this movie. Once you've done that, it goes away, never comes, because it's fulfilled. So I want to buy a big house. It's probably going to be one time only. And there are sometimes randomly repeating desires. You take up a project, you finish the project, and it never comes. You think that it's not going to come now, but randomly, due to some situation, it repeats. For example, you want to buy some kind of clothes or jewelry or a TV, and that you think will be a one-time desire, and you think that I'm not going to do that again, but sometimes it comes back because there is a need probably, or there is an impulse again, or the situations have changed, or you made an intention to do it. It can be anything. So this is the classification based on repetition. Usually the one-time desire is an intentional thing. There is an intelligence behind the one-time desire. The randomly repeating thing can be habitual or something which has no cause. It looks like there is no cause for it. The third way to classify the desires is based on consequences. So everybody knows this kind of classification. there can be 3 kinds of consequences: good, bad, and neutral. There can be a 4th kind, which I did not include, which is, the consequence is not for you. The consequence happens for the other. But I think that is an error. So when we act, when we desire something and think that it's not going to affect me, that can be called as the 4th kind. But usually it is my experience that most of the time there is a consequence of some kind. Probably the consequence gets delayed so much, sometimes many, many years, many lifetimes, that we do not notice it. That's all. There is always a consequence. All actions have consequence. This is the law. The famous law of karma. The seed of action is a desire. What is a good desire? A good desire is obviously that which produces a good action. And what is a good action? A good action is that which produces a good consequence. And what is a good consequence? A good consequence is that which helps in survival, which is helpful in sustaining the mind and body. A desire that leads to survival of others also is a good desire. And anything that is opposite of good is bad, that which is not helpful for survival. All the actions are oriented towards survival. An individual will not act if it is not about survival. All desires are about survival. You can say that no, such and such action, such and such desire was not needed for survival. For example, I wanted to take a photo of a beautiful flower, or I wanted to paint a beautiful painting. It is not really needed for survival. I can survive nicely without doing these actions or without desiring these things. The other examples can be that I want to derive an equation. I want to find a mathematical solution. These things are purely amusement for pure knowledge, do not lead to anything as simple as survival. But if you take a deeper look, if you investigate it thoroughly, you will find that at the root of these superficial desires is also survival. To create, to express, to find solutions to problems. These are all survival needs. They have been refined to an extent in some humans, that we do not perceive them as related to survival. The founding processes are same as that of survival. There can be a 3rd type of desire based on kind of consequence, which is a neutral desire. A desire which does not produce any good consequence or bad consequence also. And it may look like that this is kind of unnecessary category because the consequences are always either good or bad. So I'm using this not so obvious category just to put all those desires and actions and consequences which are below the limit of our perception. They look like as if they are neutral, but eventually the consequences, they either end up as being good or bad. If they are only slightly good or if they are only slightly bad, we do not generally perceive them as good or bad. We say, okay, things happened, and we continue. The 4th kind of classification is based on necessity. So here also 3 kinds of desires are possible according to my own experience. And they are the desires that are basic, also known as basic needs, because a need is felt. It is not merely a wishy-washy desire. If it is not fulfilled, it has very serious consequences, probably harm to the organism or death also. The 2nd kind of desire based on necessity is a feel-good desire. I don't have very sophisticated words for this, so I call it feel-good. Generally, we want to do things which feel good. That is what we think is necessary for us. So a desire to listen to a song, probably not going to contribute to survival. Probably it is beyond our threshold, so we don't see it like in that way. Probably it is not going to do anything good. it is not going to produce anything bad also, but feels good. And so we do it. So we support that desire. And the third kind is opposite of feel good and opposite of basic need, which is unnecessary desire. A desire that does not feel good and is not my basic need is categorized under unnecessary desire. So there can be a desire to, let us say, collect all the rocks from the nearby area and pile them up. Now it is totally unnecessary. It's not going to contribute to survival. It surely does not feel good. It's not the basic need. The rocks are not going to be of any use for me. If instead of rocks it were seeds or fruits, then obviously that comes under necessary desire. It also feels good, and the fruit is supporting the survival. So these are the three kinds of desires categorized on the basis of necessity. So to summarize, there are 4 ways to classify the desires: based on time duration, based on how often it repeats, based on consequences, and based on the necessity. Now I don't say that there is no 5th way or 6th way. Probably there is. It is for you to find them out. If you find a desire that does not fit under any of these categories, there are almost 15 kinds now. You can always invent a category. Why do we need to classify the desires? Obviously, the classification makes it easier to study. Why do we want to study the desires? Because our whole life is based on desires. The actions, they stem from desire. The roots of all actions is desire. Our actions decide our quality of life. The actions decide the consequences. And therefore, it is necessary to know what desire is going to produce, what kind of consequence, because that ultimately decides the total quality of the life. Life is this series of experiences of the waking state that we are going through right now. What is our desire? To have a good experience of the life. We always want good consequences. We always want to feel good. We always want to do that is necessary to fulfill basic needs, basic wants, basic desires. And we want to avoid that which is unnecessary, that which repeats unnecessarily, that which repeats randomly, that which is impulsive, that which is reactive, that which is unintentional, that which is automated, so on. So behind all these millions of desires are the basic kinds of desires, and behind these kinds of desires is one big mother of all desires, which is to have a very good life, a positive experience of the human life. So if you value your life, if you have this kind of big desire, the underlying desire, you can say, then it becomes necessary to know what a desire is. It becomes necessary to study it. One of the strategy to study and control, which is necessary to know what desires are. The classification makes it very, very convenient and easy. So next time a desire comes in your mind, do this little exercise. Try to classify it. See what kind of desire it is. Do not go ahead and act on it as if it is my desire. Do not call it my desire. It is a desire. Now use this tool, the intelligence and knowledge, to classify it. That will give you a third-person perspective of the desire. Once you see the desire as something other than yourself, it becomes possible to control it a little bit. At least those desires that do not feel good, that are probably going to result in a very bad consequence, that are totally unnecessary, useless, a waste of time, you can avoid that kind of desires and that kind of actions. Avoid making them your habit, because desiring again and again something is also an automated process. It's also a habit. So this kind of knowledge, this kind of classification gives rise to an awareness of the desire. As soon as you are aware, there is a little bit of control there. The intelligence gets a bit of time to act on that, to process the desire before acting. And as you can see, this is very helpful in achieving a good quality of life. which is happy and free life. That's all we want from the life. We want all the experience to be of a certain kind, which is of happiness and freedom. So it is all tied very nicely now, and we will continue with the ways to manage the desire, how to fulfill the desire. If cannot be fulfilled, what to do, how to avoid the suffering that happens when the desires are not fulfilled. And it is a really big subject now, so we'll continue the discussion in next part of this series on desire management.
Pure experiences.
You were listening to Pure Experiences by Tharun Pradhan.